morning, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying your breakfast. I'm Sheryl. I am the ESG reporter for the Asia Pacific region here at Bloomberg. And I'm really delighted today to have with me Philip Rose from the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership. Now, I'm told that we have a little over 10 minutes, but today I'm so excited to discuss with Philip this topic of the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So I hear from Philip that actually the Vietnamese government had previously commissioned his team to do some research into the impacts of the EU CBAM on the Vietnamese economy. So it would be great to hear from Phil what they have found and also how that might be applied to other countries in this region, from Indonesia to Thailand. Right, so first of all, Phil, can you tell us a bit more about your work at the ETP and also an introduction to the CBAM?
Sure, thanks very much, Sheryl. Good morning, everyone. Saudi Kap. The Energy Transition Partnership was set up 3 or 4 years ago with funding from a mix of 5 governments and philanthropies, and we're getting new funders coming in. And the purpose of our organization is to help the governments of Southeast Asia to transition to clean energy, particularly the governments in the so-called VIP countries, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And we mainly do that through technical assistance and capacity building. We have about 4 areas we work in. We work in policy reform, smart grids, capacity building, and de-risking investments. So quite a lot that's helping the governments plan their economies to move towards clean energy. And we got involved in CBAM at the specific request of the government of Vietnam, who wanted to get a jump ahead in terms of preparing for CBAM. Now, in our experience, people don't really, people know something about CBAM, but they're not quite sure what it is. So maybe I'll just give a very short summary of the key planks and then talk about what the Vietnamese and others are doing to prepare for it. So basically, I'm not an expert in CBAM and I'm not from the EU, so please go and check out on the EU's website. They have some quite good material there. But basically, CBAM evolved from a domestic EU carbon pricing scheme, mainly the emissions trading scheme. And what the EU realized was that if they just had an internal scheme, there would be leakage, carbon leakage, and they would just end up sucking in imports from countries with laxer regimes on carbon. So it's designed to protect EU industry from carbon leakage, but it's also designed to promote ambitious global climate targets. And the EU claims strongly that it's not a trading regime, it's a climate regime, and it's WTO compatible. I don't have any independent evidence on that, but that's what they claim. So what they're doing at the moment is they're piloting for 3 years, started last year up till 2026. And in this period, industry have to report their carbon costs, their carbon emissions, but there are no levies at this point. From 2026, the levies will slowly click in on a glide path. The EU started focusing on heavy carbon industries, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizer, and hydrogen. And the levies will be based on the actual amount of carbon used, but they do offer default values for those who find it very difficult to measure carbon. And then to the extent that there would be carbon levies in other jurisdictions, so for example, if the governments of Southeast Asia set up their own carbon levy scheme, then the EU would net that off, so you wouldn't have to pay twice. That's
Right.
sort of key principle for them.
Right.
So that's with CBAM. Shall I then go on to talk about our Vietnam work?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay.
Tell us what you found and how that might be applicable to the rest of the region.
Yeah, sure. So first to say, by the way, that I think this is of general interest. It doesn't really matter if you export to the EU or intend to export to the EU or not. Even if the EU is not one of your markets, I would say it's good to get alongside this work to become familiar with it, because many other developed markets will be introducing carbon trading schemes and the like, so it's good to already have some understanding of it. So we started with Vietnam, like I said, because the government there had their own, they basically have quite carbon-intensive industries, and they wanted to jump ahead. And to be fair to them, they also wanted to further their own quite ambitious global climate targets.
Right.
So, they are a fairly major exporter to the EU. They actually have quite a well-developed free trade agreement with the EU. So they wanted to make sure they didn't lose the benefits under the free trade agreement. And so we worked with, the main customer is the Vietnamese ministry called Monray. And we set up a consortium to look at across the whole of industry and to see which parts of the industry would be affected and do some measurements as to what the impact might be, both in terms of carbon but also then in terms of potential levies. And we've provided quite a detailed amount of policy advice to the government on what the impacts for their various industries, with quite a lot of detail. You can find, if you're interested in the detail of the study, you can find it on our website, Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership website. If you look under the Vietnam subheading, you'll find it in there. So I won't go through all that now due to time. But we looked at methodologies, including literature reviews, surveys, economic modeling, and the legal and policy framework to provide the government with the comprehensive assessment. Of course, government can only do a certain amount, then it's up to the individual industries to make their own provisions. And in line with the EU focus, we focused on 4 sectors: iron and steel, aluminium, cement, and fertilizer, which were the ones most relevant to CBAM. And we've made a summary and detailed recommendations for the government. And actually, the Vietnamese have already started implementing.
Wow, they have started.
They've already started.
So they're a little bit ahead.
Yeah, they are a bit ahead. Yeah. Prompted, I think, by hearing about the Vietnamese experience, now the government of Indonesia also asked us to do a similar work in Indonesia. So we've just kicked that off. That'll be getting going anytime soon. And I think, again, also through, to save time, I won't go through it, but I did find a very interesting piece on the implications of CBAM for Thailand, knowing that a lot of you folk are from Thailand or have foothold in Thai industry. So again, I think at this point, EU isn't a massive market for the carbon-intensive industries in Thailand. But again, the report recommends that Thailand should think carefully about it, because other jurisdictions will be coming in with similar measures in the future.
Mm-hmm. So what, is that a matter of competitive advantage then?
Yes, definitely. I think it takes time to understand these regulations and to comply with them. So those countries and those industries within those countries that are jumped ahead on this will have a competitive advantage going forward, because it's quite complicated to comply with these. I mean, just the measurement alone is quite a complicated thing and requires setting up and investment. So, yeah.
Right. So companies should start early, even though there are no levies happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, the levies will kick in 2026. I mean, they're on a sliding scale, so they'll increase over time. But the sooner you start, then the better prepared you can be.
Right. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
ครับ